guys, welcome to Priceless B Movies. I'm your host, Colin Price. In the last video, I reviewed 2001 Maniacs, which is one of my favorite kind of just fun, guilty pleasure movies at the time that it came out. And now today I'm going to review the sequel for you. Sometimes sequels, they're not all that great. But does this one hold up to the original? Shit. 2001 Maniacs, Field of Screams. 2001 Maniacs, Field of Screams once again revolves around the citizens of this kind of backwoods Civil War era town called Pleasant Valley. There is a twist, by the way, with these characters in this location. I've just been trying really hard not to spoil it in case anyone hasn't seen these, watches my reviews, and then decides to watch them. But they decide, we need to do something because these people aren't coming into our town anymore. And so how are we going to draw in victims? Well, they kind of can't. There's an issue with the local police force, and so now they can't really do their thing. Well, if you can't bring the audience to you, you bring yourself to them. So they decide to leave Pleasant Valley and go on the road hunting for more victims. It's not long before they come across a pair of very obvious Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie types who are filming this reality TV show. And, it's kind of like, okay, we're doing this show where there's these stuck-up prisses out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Midwest, and then they come across this band, what's essentially, once again, like a Civil War attraction. It's almost like a weird Southern circus feel that these people bring. So it's like, why not make a show about that? Well, I mean, unless you're wanting to get killed. Just saying. From that point on, you know how this story is going to go. One by one, the people involved in the show are going to get killed off by the citizens of Pleasant Valley. First, let me start off with the positives. Once again, that kind of edgy humor from the first one is back in this one. I will say, though, that even for me, they pushed it to an extreme a couple of times that I was like, okay, that most of this is funny, but that's honestly just kind of cringy, or that's uncomfortable, or that's, so I do think this pushes that humor over a line, personally, for me. But once again, as I said in my review for the first one, like, if that kind of thing doesn't bother you, you'll probably get more laughs out of this. Just for example, there's an African-American character who they basically lynch, and they make like a carnival game out of it. There's just stuff like that I'm thinking, like, as I'm watching it, like, okay, I get the point of this, I kind of get the satire, but at the same time, some of this just kind of crosses a line into cruelty for me that I just don't really appreciate. After a while, stuff like that stops being funny. Also, it really does look like everyone who made this movie was having a good time. I don't know if that really matters to people as much as it matters to me, but sometimes if I'm watching a movie and it's bad, I can at least derive joy from watching the actors, watching how everything unfolds. And honestly, like, you notice when there's a lot of smiling in the movie. Like, everyone on set, even when they're in character, seems to be having a really good time, and it's almost this infectious thing. I will say that this movie really does give out those vibes. Clearly, everyone who is involved in this movie really loved being there. As far as the acting goes, I know I singled out Robert Englund in my review of the first film because he was by far the best performance in that film. Here he's recast. I remember there was something I had read explaining why they recast him, but just for the life of me right at the moment I can't think of it. But now instead of Robert Englund, we got Bill Moseley playing Mayor Buckman. And, I love Bill Moseley. I've met him a few times. He's a really good guy, but this is not his best work. He can't really hold a candle to Robert Englund in that role. I think that Robert Englund struck such an iconic figure with that character that just thrusting someone else into it, even if they're as talented as Bill Moseley is, it just didn't really work for me. I didn't buy for a second that these were the same characters. Instead, it's really Lin Shaye as Granny Boone and Nivek Ogre from, Skinny Puppy and Repo the Genetic Opera. The two of them really walk away with the movie. They have all the best scenes. If one of them is on screen, you're about to laugh. As far as the kill scenes, this film unfortunately really relied more on CG than the first one did, and that really did bug me after a while. The kill scenes in this do not look as good as the kill scenes in the first one. I know that part of it is just budgetary restrictions. They didn't go into the first movie with a lot of money. Well, they went into the sequel with even less money, and it does show. Some of the kills are horrendously done. You're very much aware of the makeup effect or CGI effect that you're watching. There is one really, really good kill involving one of those giant circular like buzzsaws that you see in those old like Dudley Do-Right cartoons, right, where they'd have like the damsel in distress strapped to a log approaching this huge buzzsaw. Yeah, there is something like that in this movie. It's by far the best scene in the film. I don't want to give away too much, but I will say that in this movie, the damsel who's tied down, she doesn't get away from it. And now on to the negatives, and there's a few. First of all, if 2001 Maniacs took everything that was wrong about that original Herschel Gordon Lewis film and made it better, this movie seems really good at taking what worked in 2001 Maniacs and pushing it to such an extreme that it doesn't really work. As I already mentioned before, the humor, when it's good, is really good, but they push it to such an extent. Also, just as someone who for several years made, basically no-budget short films here in Champaign, I can say that I know the struggle of trying to get kind of the sound editing, the syncing, all that stuff. Sometimes that can be kind of tricky. When I made my short films, we literally shot everything just on a cell phone. People didn't have mics. There wasn't like fake lighting. We just did what we could with what we had. I don't think I ever spent more making a short film than like $50. And I know it shows when you watch my projects, but that was kind of the whole point, was to try to do as much as I could with very little. This movie, there's definitely times where a character is moving around, or a character, you can tell they had like one mic on the set. Now that's fine when I think you're doing something like what I was doing, where it's just you and a couple of friends making a short 10 or 15 minute film. But it's another thing when you're actually trying to market this to studios, you're trying to get people to buy DVDs, when you're trying to, and your movie just is really sloppy when it comes to the technical aspects of it. That is something that I will forever hold against this film. It looks cheap, and there isn't really a good way for me to say that. Also, and this might be the one time that I list this as a negative, look, Krista Campbell in this movie, she's a snack. All right? There, I said it. Respectfully, she could get it. However, I always kind of look at nudity in horror films, and in slasher films in particular, it's like it's an ingredient in a recipe, right? Like, it can be fun to kind of, spice up the steak a little bit, but at the same time, if you put too much pepper on it, you just ruin it. And frankly, I don't know if there's like a 5 to 10 minute segment of this movie where everyone has their clothes on. The nudity is non-stop, almost to the point where I'm sitting there thinking, like, what are you really trying to market here? And then, of course, I look at the DVD cover. Now, let's take a look at this and examine this for a second, okay? This is the primary image. You got Bill Moseley at the top, wearing his Mayor Buckman costume and looking vaguely menacing on here. But then at the bottom, what do you have? You have these three women in these, kind of basically adult bookstore costumes. And then what's the tagline? A red-hot slice of Southern hospitality. Really, are you selling me a horror comedy, or are you selling me like a 2 a.m. Skinamax movie? Honestly, with this film, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Man, it pains me to say it, but for as much as I like the first movie, 2001 Maniacs, the sequel, 2001 Maniacs Field of Screams, gets 2 stars. Honestly, that's me being generous, because there are kind of like these guilty pleasure individual sequences that I can derive a lot of fun from watching in this movie, but overall, this is kind of a train wreck. There's really no better way to say it. That was my review of 2001 Maniacs Field of Screams. Stay tuned, I got a lot more coming, and as always, thank you for watching Priceless B Movies.